Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Empowered Eczema podcast. We have a special guest today. This is Tommy Barabee, otherwise known as Barabee Healthy on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody.
And so I would just like to know your history with eczema. What is your story behind your whole journey? Did you have it as a kid? What's your situation with eczema?
So I first noticed eczema probably when it started with on my scalp, right, like psoriasis, and I was probably about 9 years old. But if I'm honest with you, Michelle, I think the foundations for it started way before then because I was a pretty sick kid and I had to have operations. I had a birth defect, something to do with my ears and my sinuses, and I had an operation when I was about 5 years old. I then had to have another operation on the same thing about a year later when I was 6. So that was 2 operations by then, loads of antibiotics, back and forth to the doctors. And I think it was around that age that I started suffering really bad with allergies and breathing difficulties. And many times I was in and out of hospital, especially during the night as well, with breathing problems. They put me on antibiotics, steroids, asthma pumps, you name it. And then I think it was when I was about 8 years old, I had my tonsils out as well. And around this time, not only with the operations and all of this going on, all of the antibiotics, there was a lot of trauma as well. My mum suffered with schizophrenia, and the house was just a bit weird. It was a bit crazy. She drove my family away. My sister left when she was young. My brother then left. My dad left, and it was just left me and my mum. So there was a lot of trauma there. And by the age of around, I'd say 9 is when I noticed it on my scalp. But it wasn't until I was about 11 or 12 that the first little blotch came up on my face. And as a 11 or 12-year-old, I was going into the shops and looking for, what skincare stuff I could buy, with any little bit of money I got. And I was trying every different product going. And it wasn't until I was about 14 that I went to the doctors about it, and they gave me a steroid cream. And it was like I think it was like a 0.5 hydrocortisone cream. And I put it on the little blotch on my face, and I was like, oh my God, it's completely got rid of it. I was like, this is a miracle. I'm loving it. So the steroid cream worked for a while, and I was using it very sparingly as I was told to. And as another year went by, I was needing a bit more and a bit more. And eventually, this blotch that started off as a little blotch, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. It was all over my scalp. It was over my eyebrows. And it was starting to spread over my face as well. So I went back to the doctor. I said, this cream isn't really working anymore. So he said, no problem. Let's give you something stronger. So he gives me a stronger steroid cream. I go through the whole cycle again. I put a tiny bit on. Amazing. Now I'm confident again. I can go on dates. I feel confident about going out. I can show my face, to people, because obviously, as everyone watching this will know, it just really ruins your confidence. So the steroid cream started working again. I went through the same thing until it didn't work. And then they tried throwing antibiotics at it. And this went on for years as well. And the steroid creams, I was using more and more and more. And by the time I was about 24, I thought I've got to try something else. Family and friends were worrying about me. My hair was falling out. I was fatigued. I was in pain. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try coming off this steroid cream. So I stopped using it, and my whole body blew up. It was everywhere. It was over my face. It was over my back, over my chest. The chest, it was just everywhere. And I was trying to sleep at night with like a wet flannel over my face because it was burning. It was weeping. It was bleeding. It was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous.
It's crazy too, and this is the whole point of this podcast, is to spread awareness of how the use of steroids takes something like a little blotch right here on your lip to full body experiencing these flares that isn't even eczema to end with.
That's right. That's right. And, they give us the thing with the healthcare system, especially in the UK, right? They're going to give you something to cover up the symptoms. They're going to suppress the immune system, cover up the symptoms, and then you sort of, being naive, you sort of believe, oh, it's gone, it's cured me, it's fixed. But the problem with that is it's not addressing the real underlying root causes that continue to fester, that continue to proliferate through the body. And, you know, we keep using these creams and knocking down the immune system, and then it leads to more issues. You know, it has a knock-on effect, a domino effect on all other areas of the body as well.
I see something really interesting on your Instagram where you say that eczema and psoriasis doesn't all of a sudden just switch on one day. And this is something that I tell a lot of my clients and talk a lot about as well. And I'd love to hear your take on that philosophy as well.
100%. So, you know, as I've mentioned, I think growing up, right, there was operations, there was trauma, I was a sick kid, but that eczema didn't, you know, show up until, I mean, the scalp maybe about 9, but on the face, it didn't really show up until I was about 11. But, you know, like bamboo, right, it spends all these years growing underneath the ground. And then within what, 90 days or something, it just shoots up out of the ground. And I believe it's something, I think most chronic disease is like that, you know, and yeah, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's brewing underneath the surface.
No, and it definitely doesn't. And something that I speak a lot about that you already touched on was the idea of trauma from a young age. And when I'm now here with adult clients trying to help them through the process, I do a lot of work with them on, all right, let's talk about childhood trauma. Let's figure out why you are responding with stress to almost every single stimulus in your life and figuring out where that came from, healing from that, and then deciding how you're going to be now to where something little doesn't trigger a massive stress response like it used to.
That's right. And, you know, a lot of people actually, because I work with a lot of people, and they don't actually realize that they're stressed. Some people mistake stress for feeling good. You know, they're talking at 100 miles per hour. They feel like they don't need any sleep. They feel like they can function on very little. They feel like they can take on the world and do everything. And this is actually a sign of stress. You know, they can't switch off. And me, myself, I didn't recognize that for many years. And yeah, stress it can be mistaken for feeling good. But like you say, with the trauma piece, you know, you can be so used to that stress response. You know, you're so used to being in a stress state, you don't know any different.
You hit the nail on the head for sure with that. I think people don't realize that stimulus doesn't make you stressed. The idea of, well, I can't help it, that made me feel stressed out. And I always say, well, let's say you're at work and you're thinking to yourself, like, let's say something really big happens at work, you're responding and you're extremely stressed out, and your coworker's over there cool as a cucumber. And you have to realize it's your own body's nervous system that's causing those stress responses based on these patterns that you've created subconsciously from years and years and years and years and years of either watching your parents or you created these patterns on your own from certain experiences. And then part of healing in a very holistic way is addressing those sorts of things. And I actually noticed that you're an integrative health practitioner, and I would love to hear your story of how you went from going through TSW, topical steroid withdrawal, what that journey was like healing naturally, and then how you're then helping other people through being a health practitioner.
Well, when I was going through that, I was actually a personal trainer. So I became a personal trainer when I was about 21 years old. And at that time, I was still managing it with the steroid creams, but it was getting worse. And my health in general was so bad. My allergies were awful, constantly had illnesses and infections all the time. One of my clients actually brought me in a box of tissues as a present because she said, "You're always blowing your nose." You know, people was being so helpful, and I was suffering so bad. And when it got really bad, and obviously the face is like one of the worst places you can have it, you know, I was waking up in the morning. Not only did I look in the mirror and, you know, cried and hated how I looked, but I thought, I've got to show up for people and I'm far from a picture of health myself, and I'm having to show up, for these people and train them. And I felt like a fraud, I felt like I just didn't know what to do. And the pain of all that is what, you know, forced me into finding another way. And yeah, I went down the road of books, of mentors, of courses, just trying to learn everything I could. Tried all sorts of different things, diets. And I went on a little break. I went on a fishing trip with my friend, and we went to France fishing. And I took all of this food, right, I was trying out this diet. It was a diet called the antifungal diet, right? So it was very low carb, heavy, meat and veg heavy. Took that with me, and I thought, right, if I haven't got anything else, that means I can't eat anything else. But I thought, if this doesn't work and I don't see an improvement, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, because I'm at the end of my tether. So I ate this food all week, and it seemed to get worse for the first few days. But then after a while, it started healing. It started flaking. The redness was going down. It was feeling better and better. And by the time I finished this fishing trip, I was like, wow, like I got home, my energy was through the roof. I felt so much better. And then I got home, and then I started introducing other foods. And then I'd found that trip told me that, okay, there's something in this, there's something in actually not going to the doctor and trying to do this on your own. And then I opened up a whole new load of problems, because then I thought the only way to deal with this was diet. So I spent a good few years trial and error with diet, couldn't work out, because then my skin started getting worse again. And I was thinking, what is it? What food is it? And I spent a good few years actually then being scared of foods, because I was wondering, what is it that keeps flaring me up? And as an integrative health practitioner, what I've learned is it's never just diet. It's exercise, it's stress reduction, it's toxin removal, it's rest and sleep, emotional balance and trauma, scientifically backed supplements, and a success mindset. Without any one of those pieces, we need all of those pieces to heal.
Again, you hit the nail on the head going through all of those different pieces that it takes to heal. And I find it's such a beautiful story of taking your own, going through something like TSW is trauma in itself, and being able to take that pain and that suffering and shift it into something where you're now helping other people is really beautiful. I have a funny little question. So for those who are watching, you may be wondering, is that a background on the video, or are you actually in the woods? So I would love to hear.
I'm actually in the woods. So 2 reasons why I come here to do podcasts and sometimes calls. Number one, is cleansing to the soul, right? You're out in nature, it's calming, it's a stress relief in itself. And number two, I live in a shared house. So there's quite a few other people living in the house, and I just like to be in a really quiet place to do these podcasts and to get right into them. So yeah, I love being here though. It's so nice. I come over here and I make it my little office some days as well. I just sit on my chair, do some work, client calls and everything, and it's lovely.
Well, it's beautiful. It looks like spring has come in fully there.
Yeah.
Well, let's end the podcast with you giving a piece of advice for maybe mental strength of getting through severe eczema or TSW, or you even had sinus issues, and that's something I've dealt with on and off as well. And I know a lot of people with eczema also deal with allergies and asthma. They're kind of a trifecta. So from a mental perspective, you even said the word success mindset, and I love that, and I teach people that myself. What advice do you have for those listening?
Well, you need to have the belief first and foremost that you can heal. And let me tell you now that there are probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who have dealt with the same thing and come out the other side. And you do have all the power to heal, right? It's not something you have to be stuck with for the rest of your life. And, you're not wrong for using steroid creams and treatments like that. We all deserve relief, but I really would urge you to use those in conjunction with looking at the true underlying root causes to, you know, your unique root causes, because everyone's could be different. You know, trauma might be a cause for a lot of people, but it won't be for everyone. You know, some people there's gut imbalances, some people there's heavy metals and parasites and fungal overgrowth and all sorts of different things, and toxicity, you know. So mold was a big piece for me as well. So, you know, it's never just one thing, but yeah, I would say always look for that underlying root cause.
Having that mindset of, hey, I have the power is beautiful. And that's why all of my stuff is always called empowered this, empowered that. And it's because the process that I went through myself empowered me to realize, oh my gosh, I have so much more control over the outcome of my body than I ever thought that I did before. And that, what an empowering feeling of realizing, oh my gosh, it's not me versus my body, and my body is this separate entity that just decides to have problems one day. It is a result of a lot of underlying things, and we have a lot of power in what we can change and tweak and be able to transform, that then our body thanks us and we have a relationship with our body versus it's our enemy. I don't understand what's happening. It has a mind of its own.
100%. And there's nothing worse than feeling powerless, you know, and not knowing what to do, where to turn, and it just adds to the stress of everything as well. So yeah, no, I totally get that and agree with that.
Well, thank you so much, Tommy, for coming on the podcast. If you are listening, you can find his information in the show notes to follow him on Instagram. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the YouTube description for all of his information as well. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone, take care. And I hope everyone feels better with their skin and you're on a journey to success and happiness.